All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Brian Ferguson, and I'm the Product Marketing Manager for Digium for all of our Switchvox products and our Digium Cloud Services products. And today we're going to be doing a Google Hangout with Casper College. Kent Brooks is the Director of IT there, and we'll also have Preece and Dustin Rollins from NP Information Systems, who's the Digium partner that helped them with their project. So we are, Digium are launching a education campaign to share how Switchvox has helped in a lot of schools and education systems, and we thought it would be a really good idea to bring Casper College in to talk about their deployment and talk about what challenges that they had and what Switchvox solved for them, and to talk to Vince and Dustin about what kind of things that they handled as well from a partner perspective. So let me introduce who we have. First off, we have Kent Brooks from Casper College. He's the Director of IT. So Kent, if you don't mind, give us a couple seconds about your school and what you do.
Okay, great. Thanks, Brian. I am Kent Brooks, and I'm at Casper College in Casper, Wyoming. I'm the IT Director. We have a institution with about 4,500 students. We have about 600 phones, since I think that is the topic at hand. We'll might as well discuss that demographic. And we probably have 300 to 400 employees. So that's kind of the core of what we're talking about here today.
All right, great, Kent. And we also have Vince and Dustin from NP Information Systems, who's a select partner of ours based out of Seattle, Washington. So Vince, can you tell us a little bit about your company?
Sure. NP Information Systems has been around for 30 years. We've been a Digium partner for 10 years. We are a small consulting company in the Puget Sound area, but a big Digium partner.
Great. Great. And then Dustin, what is your role there at NP?
I'm one of the senior telephony engineers and general IP services engineers.
Okay, and you were directly involved in the Casper College project, correct?
Yeah, Casper College was one of my primary projects, and been working with Kent for about a year now on this project.
Okay, great. All right, so Kent, let's kind of start with you. Tell me a little bit about what brought on the phone project to start with. What were kind of the problems with the existing system, or what kind of led you or motivated you into looking for a new system in general?
Well, I guess I've been in this position, about 3 years. When I walked in the door, we were running a legacy Avaya system. It's a typical enterprise system with the challenges of there's no longer parts being made. Everything that you can get to replace and repair is aftermarket. And we also had we basically were running that system plus a small piece of Cisco Call Manager Express. And so we had those two systems being run parallel. And as we looked at it, there was really no good economical way to move forward, in terms of replacing the entire campus system without going with some sort of piecemeal, longer than I desired rollout. And so I guess this is my second shot to roll out at the Digium platform. And so with that in mind, and having a previous experience, a previous good experience, we made some calls to see what our options were in terms of this particular environment. And so we knew we had to run the systems that were running parallel, and so we started doing some investigation, and then we did a little bit of a prototype to test it. And so naturally, when I got here, instead of making it better, I made it worse, because then we had 3 phone systems instead of 2. But
Nice.
we were doing that to try to I guess evaluate and compare those 3 systems and how that would work in our particular environment.
Okay, so aside from the cost, were there any particular features or things that your staff were looking for that the current systems that you had weren't addressing, or was it purely a financial decision?
To roll the whole thing out was a financial decision, but again, from my past experience, I knew there was more functionality, and everything from being able to create a conference room for all users on the system. I'm looking at that to lots of little things, even to some of the basic functionality on the D70 phones. You look at the D70 and you have your rapid dial settings turned on, and I can look, and if the president's on the phone, I know it. And I probably had an interesting conversation with the president, and he had changed from Avaya to the other system shortly before I got here. So that the CME had not been rolled out that long, but he goes, I walked in the office, and it was like the first thing he ever said to me. It wasn't, "Hi, how you doing?" It's the normal greeting for the IT director. It's, "Hey, come here, look at this. I have to dial 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 buttons to get to our board president." And he said, "We need to do something about this." All right. And so I guess because of my familiarity, with this, and I mean, I'm a little bit familiar with some other systems out there, but I knew we had the ability to get more functionality for our users and probably reduce our costs at the same time.
Right. So, cost-wise, did you have kind of a ballpark idea of how much you would save by going to something new? Were you able to kind of put a dollar figure on that, on the savings?
Yeah, and I mean we were, and really, if you do, with what we looked at, we saved roughly $493,000 versus what we would have done rolling out the other system. I actually just finished calculating that the other day. I don't know that we knew that number exactly when we started, but I was guessing $300,000 to $400,000, but the actual number with where we're at right now versus putting the exact number of phones in is we basically saved $500,000.
Wow! And where do those costs come from, mostly?
Phones, handsets, licensing agreements. It's probably the typical stuff.
Right.
And then like you say, our recurring costs. We do have through the end of this fiscal year, we're running a third-party maintenance agreement with one of the entities that support the legacy equipment, and we will have recurring savings, pretty significant as well.
Okay. So Vince, tell me a little bit about how MP Information Systems got involved, and what kind of challenges you saw when you first got involved in the project.
Yeah, so we got involved in this project when I got a call from Kent one day saying, "Hey, we're looking at Switchvox, and I need to build a proof of concept," and so we worked out the details of building out a proof of concept, and that pilot, I would say, went for a while, and Kent did quite a bit of extensive testing, and once that pilot really proved, the proof of concept proved that this was a viable option, the biggest challenge that we saw at the beginning was we have an extensive amount of handsets, and we're going to have 3 different phone systems to integrate and make that a seamless function across all 3 handsets, and that certainly was by far one of our bigger challenges, and Dustin did a superb job, in my opinion, in making that happen.
And Dustin, tell us a little bit about what kind of work it took to make that happen. What was kind of involved in that?
Yeah, so the way that the Call Manager Express was talking to the legacy equipment was over a PRI, so that's a digital link, 23 concurrent call paths. We actually inserted a PRI gateway in between those 2 pieces of equipment, and then we were able to pull SIP over to the Switchvox, and using some routing functions within that gateway, we were able to route calls to the appropriate system across that PRI link to the legacy equipment.
Okay, and Kent, I guess from your perspective, the important thing there is that your users they needed to know that there was nothing happening in the background, right? It needed to look as one big system to them. Right?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, the process needed to be somewhat invisible, so we were in kind of a, I suppose a little bit of a bind there, because we really need to make it seamless as we were doing the proof of concept, and as we were continuing to make those other systems work and talk to each other. And again, you know how that goes. The more systems you have talking to each other, the more miscommunication you can have. So that was one of our huge challenges, indeed.
Right. So today, when it's connected, if somebody is on the side that has, is it a certain building or a certain portion of the campus that has Cisco today, or is it how is it laid out?
Well, now actually today, in terms of where we're laid out, this is going to be roughly a 600 phone system, and we are 350 phones into our Digium conversion. So the Cisco portion of it was retired roughly 2 weeks ago, and so we are actually back to 2 systems from one. But when we started, it was roughly 500 analog Avaya handsets and roughly 100 Cisco handsets. And so again, we started that proof of concept was 18 phones actually. So we started with 18, and we've kind of been building. One of the issues is, as we did this as well, we had some major network upgrades, because we wanted to. I mean, yeah, I know we can do the power adapter and all that stuff, but we wanted to be able to just utilize PoE, or again, I guess for some of the viewers, for power over Ethernet, and not have to rely on a power source specifically being in that area. And so the path that we've taken in terms of deploying, there's roughly 26 buildings on this campus, and the path we've taken to deployment is following our network upgrades. More bandwidth, power over Ethernet, all those sort of typical things that you would do in this kind of situation.
Okay, so yeah, it's really common that we've found in the education industry for with budgets as tight as they are to have this slow rollout idea, and with the Digium gateways and Switchvox, it's as you guys have found, it is possible to do that. So talk as far as the user experience goes. So if I'm a user on that's using one of the current Avaya phones, I can still dial a regular extension, and it would dial somebody on a Digium phone today, correct? So.
Absolutely. You wouldn't have the issue you run into is all the folks on the Digium system, they can see each other's extensions and that sort of thing. You had some issues there where folks who were on the Cisco system or the Avaya system, the display doesn't work exactly the same, so you don't see who's calling you. Right. As you would if everybody's on a single system. So, those are. But again, that was a situation I walked to. That was happening anyway with the 2 systems. So.
Right. Okay. Okay. So good. So, tell me a little bit about. I know a lot of schools deal with different things, but how did the kind of evaluation process? Was there any other vendors involved, or how long did the purchase process take? What kind of approvals, just kind of in general, that you had to go through, and kind of how long did that process take? We really probably took we ended up taking about did we take a year or maybe 8 months or so for that proof of concept? I'm trying to remember exactly the time. Time just
about a year.
It was about a year, and so from the time we originally installed it, because we got us involved in another major project, and so that's really what happened. We had a little bit of a delay, and so we got it up and going. We tested for a while. Then we worked very closely with our purchasing office, because depending on where we're at, many times you have a proof of you have an RFP process if you're going to go with a whole system. how this ended up working a little bit differently is we ended up proof of concepting the system. The system was up and running, and so we really had 3 systems already up and working. And so when it came down to push and shove, all we had to do when we decided that we were going to go to Switchvox was we really had to buy more handsets to essentially get the system going. And so we ended up collecting bids for handsets. Again, the system was already running. The one, with Call Manager Express, we were at a point where we couldn't scale to the point that we could have provided service for all 600 users. So again, we would have had to rebid the whole system if we would have gone that route. But really, with the proof of concept and evaluation, since we did such a thorough evaluation, sometimes there's a place in our purchasing system that you can do that to compare systems apples to apples and see what will work best in your environment. And it was a no-brainer in terms of the cost. You knew what the cost comparisons were going to be, and we compared that to you guys' cloud offering, Cisco's cloud offering, and a couple others. And if I were a IT director in a small business, 10 to 20 people, the cloud offering, I would have probably been jumping. But in terms of the total monthly cost, it was that was out of the ballpark as well,
right,
in our situation. So we did those kind of comparisons, and obviously made sure that we're working within the rules that we have to work through. And on the handsets, when we bid that, NP Info won that as well. So we were ready to march forward.
Okay. So how about the training process? I know one of the common concerns of schools is that new phone systems or new technology in general can be complex, and our users typically aren't technology savvy, or a great deal of them. Have you encountered any training issues? What kind of things are you doing for training to help your staff get ready, or is MP Information Systems involved in that process? How does that work?
Vince came in and probably the very first trip, and he did a great session for us, provided some initial materials, and we probably built off that. I've always been a fan of aggressive professional development. If you say the higher ed standard is 3% of your budget, I'll double or triple that. It's just been my experience that's a good idea. And so, in this case, we didn't necessarily double our training budget, but we looked at that pretty hard, and we began developing a resource page. And I'm going to go ahead and switch screens real quick. I'll go there actually.
Sure, that'd be great.
Real quickly, come on, screen share. This page has this URL to our Casper College phone system deployment page. And so I'm going to move there real quickly. And so I guess I've gotten in the habit of just jotting stuff down about what I'm doing. And so we tried talking about the things that we were doing over time, and then we created a fairly aggressive training schedule. We first of all made a lot of your training videos available. The link that I'm pointing at right here is essentially your stuff. Thanks.
You're welcome.
But again, we do training a couple times a week, and we have been for months. And we've made it available. We basically set up a classroom with Digium phones. Our guy Don Lewis has done a great job learning the system, working with Dustin and Vince, and we pretty much do training twice a week for the core functionality. And we also, as we walk into the situation, they come into the training, we give them a pamphlet, and then I guess it's phone training by walking around. Don is pretty good about and it's very important to us for him to walk around and ask people and follow up with questioning and that sort of thing. I think we probably train more aggressively than a lot of folks. And I mean, I don't know, Dustin and Vince, you guys are kind of familiar with what we're doing on that end. I mean, Would you say that's true? I think we train very aggressively and provide opportunities.
No, I would concur, Kent. I think you guys do a great job with training, and one of my biggest indicators is whether or not a project is going to be successful or not is the amount of training or involvement in training by the customer. And when we go to offer training and a customer has 50% of their people show up, I know we're going to have a problem because it's not a long trip from I don't know how this phone system works to I hate it, get it out of here. And so the more training that can happen, the better a project usually goes. And certainly Casper College has done an outstanding job of building a very good training curriculum.
Okay. So, Kent, how about the feedback so far out of these training classes or the features that are included? Has it been greeted with a good response? Are there any specific features that people are really excited about? How's the feedback going so far?
It's been positive. We've rolled out about 350 phones, and I really have only heard 2 really complaints. And so, in the whole scheme of things, that's pretty good. And it was, there's a few things they were just used to doing. With the old phone, you kind of get in, how folks get into a habit of doing things, which is fine. And so, we've tried to purposely, live purposely in terms of just directly addressing those. Don goes out and he'll wander around and ask if they need some extra assistance. And again, this round of training is for the core functionality of the handset. And that's kind of been our approach when people even start talking about extra functionality like extra ringtones, some of those things. We're going to go probably this summer. We'll have a second phase where we again get people more engaged in terms of the web interface and probably the mobile aspects. It's kind of our plan for the next phase of the training. I suspect we'll run, summer there's fewer people here, but we'll probably run weekly trainings, and then we plan on fully being deployed by the end of June. We'll probably have to set up a little more aggressive training schedule, as we enter the fall, so that people can try out some of the web-based functionality and the mobile functionality.
Right, the bells and whistles, right?
Absolutely. It's been. That's a great way to describe it. It's been core up until this point, and bells and whistles are coming this summer.
Right. Good. Okay. So Vince, that's actually a pretty common problem for really any new technology, but especially, or talking about voice over IP, just because things function a little differently than they did in the old world, right? So it takes different functions to do even the simplest thing that would happen on a traditional system is just handled a little different with the dip button push. How do you guys handle that when you're dealing with your clients, and is it a training situation? Is it just you have to explain that this is just the way that we do it now? How do you guys kind of overcome that?
Yeah, it's really about change management. Some companies, some staff handle change very, very well. Some companies, some people, not so much. And based on that interaction, we will modify our approach a little bit. Training is certainly a huge part of getting people up to speed and comfortable with those changes. But there's plenty of times where you have to go beyond the training and interact with specific people or business units independently to make sure that they're comfortable that this new way of doing things is going to benefit them, is going to work with the way they do business, and help them see the value of the new phone system.
Good. So Dustin, you have tons of experience of installing Switchvox or phone systems in general. Tell us a little bit about the deployment process. If you're you're having to deploy 350 phones, that sounds like a big challenge. What is kind of the process for you guys, and how does it be seamless to the end user so they don't have any hardship in that process?
Well, I think it's important to realize that when you're deploying 300 or 500 phones, that no matter how aggressively you deploy those things, it really is a phased implementation. Certainly in Kent's case, doing that by building has been hugely important to them. That way, people who are sitting across the cube or across the hallway from somebody are on the same system, and they can ask questions back and forth and work through things. The other thing that's important to note that makes higher ed and education actually a little different than the run-of-the-mill small business or medium-sized business is the fact that there's typically resources in that organization. So, for example, at Casper College, Kent referenced Don Lewis. Don's been hugely valuable in this process, not only from the training perspective and knowing their physical people in their environment, but being able to actually help in that process. So we've taken the role of really helping them do the deployment rather than doing it ourselves. So they have IT staff and other staff on campus that are actually doing a lot of the placing phones on desks and helping users through the tasks. And then we work more as an escalation point for them in helping them do the configuration on the back end and answering the harder questions that they haven't come across. And to your earlier point, helping them develop solutions for on the old system it used to ... how to make those conversions to the newer way of thinking, the voice over IP way of doing the Avaya tasks. Because the reality with Switchvox, and the cool thing with Switchvox is almost everything that they used to be able to do on the Avaya, you can do. You might just have to do it differently. So there's certainly a transition process there. And so I think certainly in higher ed, using the resources available within the organization, so Kent and his staff, hugely important. And anytime you're doing a huge deployment, 3, 4, 5, 600 phones, there's certainly got to be local resources there that are familiar with it and that are going to handle it on a daily basis because they have that many users.
Okay, good. So, Kent, tell us a little bit about kind of how your general call flow works. Do you have just general phone numbers that come into a central place, or does everybody have their own direct phone number? How do calls get routed around, and is there anything that's kind of out of the norm that you can think of?
Everybody is assigned an extension, but we did kind of copy our old call flow where you have a switchboard, and we do have a switchboard operator who likes the system very much, by the way. Cindy, she's a good hand and has done well and is liking it a lot. But we have various groups, enrollment services, human resources, those sort of groups. And so like I say, if we talk about calling into the system, you do have your core list of menu options, which again, I guess repeating myself, is the enrollment services, student services, human resources, IT, those sort of things. But the menuing is fairly simple, and there's some small submenus under that. That's we didn't get real fancy, and I think that's almost core versus bells and whistles. We wanted to kind of keep it as close to how it was, and then once we're fully deployed, we may then come back in and reevaluate and see if there's ways to improve that whole call flow. So,
right. Do you see any ways within your school where the mobility app or having the ability for people to be mobile and use their cell phone, does it seem like that's going to be helpful to your school as far as the feature goes?
Oh, absolutely. I think it will. I think we have, you have instances where coaches or sponsors are traveling. We have some faculty who are full-time faculty or remote. Being able to make it look as though those folks are on our system. Well, they'll be on our system. So I guess we're not making it look like they're on our system. They'll ultimately be on our system with, the IP aspect. So I think some of that stuff will be invaluable, as people travel and are able to push calls out. And, even again, I come back to the little things the handsets allow you to do, or even the switchboard. You get more indicators where of being on vacation or out of the office or out to lunch, that sort of thing. That was actually one of our interesting disgruntled phone users. But again, this person had gotten the phone, they had not been to the training, and I was told in the hallway how much better the old system was. And so I asked a couple questions, and they had not had the opportunity to attend training. And so that was one case in particular where we sent Don to, basically do a personalized training session with that individual to show some of that additional functionality.
Right.
So that's how that kind of flowed.
Okay. Okay. So that's a really great kind of overview of the project. I definitely appreciate that. If you had to, if you were advising another school today, whether it's a university or K through 12 or whatever age group, what kind of advice or tips could you give them of things to look for, so that things that you wish you would have done differently? What kind of advice would you give somebody else looking kind of at the beginning of the project today?
If you're speccing out an appliance, for example, and this is even from my last experience in rolling out the system, I would listen to you guys. I would listen to you, Dustin, about memory specifications, and then I would double it. That's even just having a recent conversation with one of the guys that used to work for me at the old shop. He said, that was one of the things they did. Also, in terms of getting your phones standardized, I really appreciate the fact that Digium has come out with the multiple tiers of functionality with the Digium phones. That has been a tremendous thing. One thing, again, I guess I'm referencing my last experience. We went with refurb Snome handsets, and that didn't work out so well. Other than that, the deployment went tremendous. And so, conscientiously, in this experience, partly the conversations I've had with the guys that I used to work with, we conscientiously chose to go and standardize on the Digium handsets. We had the option of keeping some of our Cisco handsets and upgrading the firmware. We weighed that option and said, I understand I can do a firmware upgrade. The phone will work with the system. But again, even though Dustin said in some cases we have more staff, this staff also is dealing with 1,800 computers and networks and mobile device management, because there's 2.7 devices times 4,500 students, and so there's other things to do. And so when we looked at the maintenance down the line, we wanted to get to a point where the handsets were totally interchangeable, where we could increase the productivity of the person on, in every single office, and give them a robust handset with, with 100 speed dials and all the functionality that everybody else has. And so we did that sort of thing. And really focused on kind of standardizing the handsets. Just to kind of give us the benefit of the doubt on my last deployment, you guys didn't have the handset out first time I did this, so it wasn't, those Digium handsets came out after that experience.
Right. That's a kind of a great point. So, Vince or Dustin, you guys were deploying Switchvox and Asterisk systems well before Digium phones. What kind of differences have you seen, kind of pre-Digium phone and post-Digium phone, that have kind of changed the way you deploy, or have made it easier or more simple or faster? What kind of things have you noticed with the new phones?
Well, yes to all of the above. We, for 10 years, sold Polycom phones, and Polycom was our standard. because it was a quality phone and there were lots of pluses to it. And once we saw the Digium phone, it just took it to the next level. The Digium phones are faster to deploy. I think that they have more functions, better features, and they cost slightly less. In Kent's experience or project, we looked at it and they did have Cisco phones, but the cost savings that they would have realized by not buying those phones was going to quickly be eaten up by labor costs to manage those phones. And when you took a look at a cost perspective, while the equipment costs were going to be lower, the management and implementation costs were going to be greater. So we really think that the Digium phones are our phone of choice and what we recommend to customers.
And Dustin, how about you from the hands-on application from an installation perspective? What kind of impact have Digium phones had on your world?
Yeah, I'll echo a lot of what Vince said. That is, the Digium phones with the auto provisioning features that are built into both Switchvox and Asterisk, very, very, very simple to deploy. You can talk somebody through it over the phone who's a non-technical person, even if you need to. It really is fantastic when it comes to deployment. A Polycom phone, in our experience, in best case scenario, with all the best tools available to you, takes a semi-technical person a few minutes to provision that device and assign the extension number to that desktop device. In the Digium phone case, a non-technical person can do that same task in a matter of a few seconds. I think, Kent, one day, a couple weeks ago when I was on site helping them, 3 of us did one floor of one of their larger administration buildings, which had about 70 phones, probably 60 phones, something like that. And the 3 of us together did that in about 4 hours with all Digium phones. So that's physically unboxing them, putting them on the desks, assigning the extensions, and helping users get familiar with their phone. So it really is a very fast process using the Digium phones.
Great.
I would add one more thing that, if you talk about something that a school or an institution should look for, and it's sort of one of my soapbox items in terms of the open source world. I am an advocate for open source solutions, and one of the things that I am convinced that people don't understand when they're evaluating is that you're not talking about a pure open source environment. I don't think people understand that, and so the model that has been put in place to have partners who can commercially support this phone system is pretty important, because I don't assume permanence in terms of my being here or my lead Digium guy being here. I think we're pretty safe, and I think he's pretty safe. But you know what? Things happen, opportunities come along, just life changes, and so I'm a firm believer that in most situations, it's a good idea to really look at a commercially supported version of an open source project. In this case, Digium is obviously the commercially supported version of Asterisk, and so in my last job, we actually played with, we downloaded the Asterisk software, installed it, played with it, installed some phones, and even then when we looked at it, we said, we want to build some sustainability, so that in case the institution, in case the people who are leading the charge in a particular institution's deployment leaves, which does happen, that there's some sustainability and some permanence for the institution. I don't think we're being good stewards of our institutional resources, or doing what is right ultimately for the institution, unless you build something that's going to have some permanence or some sustainability to it.
Right. Yeah, good point. So I guess Vince or Dustin, feel free to handle this one. I'll ask you the same question I asked Kent. So maybe some other schools that you've dealt with, and with after this point in the Casper College project, what kind of advice or tips would you give schools that are out looking that could kind of point them in the right direction, or at least kind of give a good starting point for them?
Well, we support several different schools, and I think that there are some unique requirements to schools, whether it's high school, colleges, etc. And thus far, Switchvox has been able to fill those needs very, very well. I think that what I would say is that out of our schools, several of them have custom needs, and Switchvox's ability to have customization done has been very helpful. One of our schools really had a need for emergency notification. That's something we'll probably be working with Kent on, where if a gunman comes in, something along those lines, we can create custom applications that will meet specific organizations' needs, and Switchvox does a great job with that. Some of the other systems that are a little bit more in a box don't give you the range of flexibility that Switchvox does.
Right. And you're able to do some of those things with the handsets, right? Because we launched the APIs for the actual handsets last year, right?
Yeah, correct.
Okay, great. Okay, well, great. Well, I definitely appreciate everybody's time. I think we got a really good feel for your, Kent, and your project, and I definitely appreciate you coming on and talking to us about Casper College and your experience so far. Hopefully, you'll continue to have as good a luck as you've had to this point, but we definitely appreciate your time.
You're welcome.
And Vince and Dustin, I appreciate yours as well. And if there's anything that we can do at Digium for your company or your school, please let us know. Go to www.digium.com. You have lots of tools there. We have an education site that you can go to that has lots of tools there. We just launched a Switchvox for Education guide that you can download that gives kind of the major benefits to all the major roles within the school. Switchvox for the teacher, Switchvox for the administrator, Switchvox for the IT staff. There was a webinar that we did last Tuesday for Switchvox for Education that you can go and get the recorded link to from our website. So lots of great tools that we have for education. We would love to help you out with your project and get you connected to Vince or somebody like him, depending on your area of the country, and get you taken care of. But for the panelists, I appreciate your time, and thank you for joining today's Google Hangout.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.